Mayor Sadiq Khan's London of 2023. One of a number of divisive decisions that have reverberated across the cityscape was the expansion of the reviled ultra-low emission zone. Now, it's been met with widespread disapproval and, frankly, discontent. Now, the move earned the ire of residents and businesses alike, sparking vehement opposition and catalysing a fervent debate about the city's environmental policies. As the ULEZ controversy brewed, the anticipation for the forthcoming 2024 mayoral election has intensified, offering maybe a glimmer of hope for a potential shift in London's urban strategy and indeed leadership. Well, joining me now is Howard Cox, Reform UK mayoral candidate and the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Howard, thank you very much for your company. Now, Fair Fuel UK, of course, been a phenomenally successful campaign that's been running. When did you set it up? Was it after 2010 or was it even earlier than that, Howard?
No, it was 2010, the end of 2010. We got our first fuel duty cut in March 2011, but George Osborne gave us a penny cut.
And how would you say actually drivers are faring now compared to back then in 2010?
Well, I suppose if you extrapolate what it could have been, because there was a fuel price escalator planned by Gordon Brown before David Cameron got elected. And there was no plans by the Tories to actually get rid of that fuel price escalator. We would be sitting on prices now, petrol and diesel, 50 to maybe even up to 70 or 80 pence more per litre. And we'd be up to sort of Hong Kong levels of pricing at the pumps. So they're faring pretty well. We haven't had a fuel duty rise for 14 years. We even had 6p cut in that time. And to cut a long story short, but we are still, unfortunately, one of the highest tax drivers in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Howard, I was just reading today in the Daily Telegraph, Sir James Dyson, of course, the founder of Dyson, has said that actually we need to go for growth and stop focusing on things like inflation. Now, there might be many of your supporters, not just of Reform UK, but of Fair Fuel UK, who are saying, well, actually, it's inflation that's hitting me at the pump.
Absolutely right. I mean, as you know, every time we hear the inflation, the RPI figures announced, in the next sentence, we always hear because pump prices went up or went down, depending on what happened to inflation. We should be concentrating in growth and we should be putting more money into people's pockets. And there's two ways of doing that. One is to cut fuel duty, because, as I said, we're still the highest tax, or one of the highest tax drivers in the world. If we cut it by 20 pence, inflation will come down by something like 1 to 1.5%. And the other thing, of course, is stop the opportunistic profiteering in the fuel supply chain. That's one of the bad things, Darren, we're seeing, because, as you well know, you can just drive 3 or 4 miles and see the same branded fuel, Texaco's or Esso or whatever, Sainsbury's or Morrison's, and you'll see there could be 5p difference. We have no idea how pump prices are arrived at.
Yeah, I mean, Howard, just finally then, I'm assuming that all you want for Christmas is a few votes for Reform UK.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we are moving in the right direction. It's a big uphill battle to fight, but the more and more I talk and present, I always say to people, forget about the colour of the policies, red, green or blue. Just look at the issues we're fighting for. And when we talk about the issues Reform UK are talking about and what I'm standing for a mayoral election, you'll find that a lot of people think, oh, I didn't realise that. Oh, we're coming across. Watch this space, Darren. And happy Christmas,
we shall see, we shall see. Howard Cox, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Reform UK's mayoral candidate and, as I say, the founder of the Fair Fuel campaign. Now, folks, my three wise men are still in the studio. Of course, got Charlie Lambden, housing market specialist, Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP, and Benjamin Butterworth. On that point, actually Labour have got a real problem here, haven't they, with the fact that people are finding this ULEZ thing to be deeply distasteful and unpopular.
Yeah, and that's why they struggled in the Uxbridge by-election, isn't it?
Yeah.
People of Uxbridge.
Which, of course, was Boris Johnson's former seat.
Exactly. And they came out in the by-election and voted to remain Conservative, and that was a vote against ULEZ in many respects.
Yeah, which is bucking Benjamin a trend at the minute, right? Because the Conservatives are...
I mean, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has just dropped any intention to have a similar scheme there. So clearly there's a concern about the electoral effect of it. And the Labour Party centrally has said that, they have no intention to try and thrust this upon Labour-run councils. But what I would say is that, you talk about the cost to drivers rising, as the cost of everything has risen dramatically under sort of a tragic 13 years of Tory government. But actually, if you look at the cost to people who get public transport in the form of trains, well, it's going up 4.9%, which is higher than inflation. And over the last decade, it's risen twice as fast as inflation has the cost of getting a train ticket. If I go back to Manchester, it's, like 90 quid, easily for a standard ticket. I mean, these are extortionate prices. And while I'm not saying that drivers should have to pay enormous amounts to go about their daily lives and get to work. I think often we forget that the cost of public transport has gone through the roof. Again, in Greater Manchester, until recently, you had to get several different bus tickets to get around that city, as much of the country you do, which means you can be paying a tenner just to get to work. And I think sometimes we forget that, I would rather people weren't using their cars at all or not as much. But the way to do that is to help make public transport affordable.
Well, I mean, in the North East, we didn't really have a bus service. They all went on strike for a good long while.
And the SNP in Scotland, a third of all bus routes have been axed since they came to power. And obviously Scotland is more rural than many parts of the UK.
Coming from Sussex, though, that's a pretty expensive train ticket as well, isn't it? A lot of people complain about that particular route.
Yeah. The trains are very expensive. I think the buses in London are pretty good, but where Sadiq Khan has really got it wrong, I mean, I think the ULEZ was a terrible idea. He's completely failed on the housing promises he made, and that's impacted everybody, and it's really made it worse. So I hope to see a new mayor of London next.
Yeah, and the running of TfL is appalling. I mean, it's hard to use the underground network. There's something wrong with it every day. I mean, I use it every day, and there's something wrong with it. Yeah, a negative experience.
Yeah, so he's not faring well.
I mean, gladly, in the interests of balance, I think Sadiq Khan's a reasonably effective mayor. And of course, when Boris Johnson stopped being mayor, they took away the subsidy for transport for London that the London Underground had. And so when people say, the London Underground system is losing money, which it wasn't under Boris Johnson, the Tories took away the central government subsidy that it had when Boris Johnson was mayor of London.
Well, yeah,
so the maths are very different.
He hasn't achieved anything.
No. I've got to say, calling Sadiq Khan an effective mayor is the best way to bring out my inner Grinch. I'll tell you.
I watched a video of his promises, and he hasn't met one of them yet.
Well.
Achieved nothing.
Well, of course, let the public decide. And as Benjamin says, in the interests of balance, there are many other candidates that are standing in